Back to the Life First podcast, where we're going to be talking about the Mel deck. So I actually put quite a bit of time into creating this Mel list that you see here in front of you. We're talking about the new decks for Conflicted Reese Diva. And it's interesting to say new, even though it's been out for a little while, but we're a little late putting these videos out because of GP. Still, all the same, I want to make sure that Mel got her time in the sun. And we can do a little bit of a deep dive about Mel. I actually have a fair amount of time under my belt with this specific deck list. As you can see, I've messed with it and made at least 3 major iterations: 6.0, 6.1, 6.2. So this is my most recent version at 9.2. I left it here not because it's a bad deck, but it was just I decided I wasn't going to take it to the GP, so I stopped refining it. But it is, I think, really strong. It actually does a lot of the things that I wish Bang in the deck, the green deck that I was maining prior to this, could have done, but it just does it a little bit more efficiently, and we'll talk about that in a second. Let's just talk about Mel herself right now. So Mel is a level 3 green Elrig that has the following abilities. First off, you get 2 coins. You get 3 at the start, so you get this total of 5 throughout the game. You get to an enter ability, which you add a Ketcha, a back fat, and you also get a soft boiled egg token, basically, put into your Elrig deck. These are craft signi that you're going to be able to attach just in a similar way as souls to stuff. And then your action abilities that you can pay an enter and then attach one of these craft signi as an accessory to a signi. Basically just like an enchant creature in Magic or a soul in Wixoss. And then it has a once a game ability, which is surprisingly effective. During your opponent's next turn, your opponent can't use spells or action abilities. Generally speaking, you're going to use that last part, that once per game, on the turn before your last turn as a way to just narrow down what the opponent can do in order to beat you. And that's more or less what you're going to use for it. It's not awful, but it's not like utterly amazing either. The real trick is that you get these different sort of what do you call them, accessories. So Kacha does an effect where it gives the Signy plus 10,000 power. Backfat gives the Signy Lancer, and a soft boiled egg gives the Signy a very specific ability. I'll just read it out verbatim. Constant, if the Signy attached if the Signy with this attached to it as an accessory would leave the field, you may instead remove this accessory from the game. If you do, you down that Signy. This is just basically a way to keep a Signy on the field for longer. And what I really like about these, actually more than I like Deus, even though it does cost me an extra one, is that these all are incredibly useful in a game of Wecross just in general, in a vacuum, whereas Deus of Souls just open a lane, which is good, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's not. But every single one of these has a use, and it allows the rock deck, which is generally speaking what most green centers end up being, to be more flexible than it normally would be, right? Bang had this issue where it did a thing very well, it was very resilient, but it really didn't have much flexibility to it. Mel gives you that flexibility at the cost of enter, so you have to at least put enter charging stuff into the deck, but you're green, so that's not going to be too big of an issue. Outside of that, you've got sort of a very normal Elrig assist. You've got the Machina Wing Slash and Machina Smash. These help you recover cards because, again, green does not necessarily lend itself to card recovery very cleanly. What it does do is it gives you, it does give you enter, and then you use that enter, and that enter stuff becomes cards in your trash, and then black comes in and recurs those cards from your trash pretty much for free back to your hand. So that's the cycle that you'd like to continue, right? You just don't want to do green recursion because green recursion sucks. But green enter charge into black recursion is really great. And then you've got Line Dig, which is just a average draw spell in this deck. Really, the draw is for disrespect, because in this deck, you generally speaking will have access to cards in hand. You're pretty resilient to discard, and you also will have enter, which means that this is unlike a lot of 3-stops, which are like flexible payment 2-stops. This is truly a 3-stop. Following that, you've got Super Celestia Saber, Energy Door. These are just 2 pieces that you use in general to help gum up the game and help you get into the late game. Gives you cards in your hand, gives you guards, gives you ability to play defensive, gives you ability to play offensive. Energy Door, in particular, you draw yourself 2 cards. Generally speaking, more that mode more than anything. And then the Super Celestia Saber allows you to get a white Signy and a black Signy. There's that flexibility is super needed in this deck because the white and the black do a lot of carrying that the green can't do on its own. The green overall, if you just look at it in general, is more or less just energy, right? Chirin is energy. Centurion is energy, although in this deck it does sometimes become removal, which is pretty cool that there's at least some removal. Amino acid is not necessarily energy. It's actually counter to it's Machina hate basically, but it does give you energy on the what do you call it, on the assist the life burst line, and then you get a little bit of energy from the life burst of this, which is one of the reasons why we're running it. But we're also running it for that power bump. Power bump allows you in scenarios that you don't necessarily want amino acid, allows you to still manage to kill go over the Machina negative 12,000 effects and other things that are negative 12,000 effects. This deck is very, very good against negative 12,000 effects. I should also mention there's a lot of high power Signy, including Remember here at 15k. That's part of the deal, and we'll go into it a bit more. But then the Angel here is one of the only life bursts that doesn't give any extra enter, but I just wanted some amount of cards more, and this is just like one of those random life bursts that when you're up against a discard deck and you click this, the opponent's suddenly like, oh, I guess I don't discard you out. You could replace this with a Nettle types Y if you want, just so that you can have more removal if you'd like. I personally prefer the Angel though, but I have played with both. And then what else is in the green? Here is a Pasta type Dre Patra. It's just good filtering. You generally speaking, you're not gonna use that green unless it gets you back a guard. The black is gonna be you getting something mostly from it, and it's just gonna get some good card that you probably need, or some enter to pay for itself, basically. Just a free lane fill at that point. But also one of the cool things that you can do is, aside from comboing with this to give plus 10,000 power, and then this to use its ability to give itself negative 10,000 power, and then give negative 10,000 to something else, you actually can attach a soul to this, and then not only this deck becomes super resilient and just doesn't die, every turn you can use its action ability and snipe something from the board and basically use it as return or a repeatable removal, which ends up being actually pretty good in this deck. Let's talk about some of the level 1s here. So you've got Yuki. That's one of the cards that you're going to recur quite often, is the ability to move a Signy into the Lancer field is pretty good. Move a Signy into the things that you want to move in front of is pretty good. And then vanillaing out things like Coella or stuff that could be annoying to play against, because you do have some, not necessarily, just to be clear here, Coella does not get rid of these abilities granted by the accessories. They're not like souls. They're worded differently. So you can't get vanillaed out by Yuki or Coella, which is actually a strength, by the way. I just want to be clear about that. But vanilling out other things that could be kind of annoying on the opponent's field is a major improvement. One of the main reasons to run white in the deck. As is getting, some extra draw here. Filtering for Miracle Draw can actually help out very late game. It's not something I'm looking forward to use all the time, but it's definitely something I like having. But the main reason we're running white, aside from Remember and Exia, which are both really good cards, is Donna. Donna is imperative in this deck. Like, this deck needs Donna more than any other deck out there. Aside from having the extra enter to just always have Donna use its enter ability, which will often be 20k or higher, and then you'll just have a field of these 20ks out. Right, all you need to do is, for example, put the accessory on, I don't know, Phalaris or something, have a 22k Phalaris, and then have Donna gain the equal to the power of that Signy, which is 22k currently. So then it becomes 22k, and then you, I don't know, put down a Anna Mirage. You suddenly have a field that's, or Remember, you have a field that's really resistant to removal and really resistant to getting killed. And that can gain you virtual card advantage. But the more important part is actually these 3 coins, right? So when we start with Mel, at level 0, we gain, that's not level 0, we gain 3 coins. Now that 3 coins is really important because the first turn we have barely any filtering. Yes, we have MC Line Dig, but that doesn't get us guards. And really, in this world, we in order to survive for a long onslaught, we need guards early. And that's where Donna comes in. So Donna finds you guards. It can find you anything, which is why it's good in general, and its life burst is actually really good as well, more filtering. But the fact that it just gets you guards right away for free in this deck is incredibly strong. Moving right along, some of the other stuff that we get, Bang here is another way to get more enter. I've had turn 2s with this deck where I've like played against, like, for example, white aggro decks, which constantly bounce cards back into my hand, and then I'm just going to discard them to the hand size. So Bang comes in as sort of like one of these like discard outlets for us that just takes the extra cards that we don't need, or if we're up against discard, just gets rid of those cards so that it converts them into something useful rather than just being discard bait for our opponents. And then we just draw, or we just enter charge, and the enter charge does matter. We have actually quite a bit of a lot of effects that we're trying to use full function, right? So Machina Smash will probably try to use full function. Line will try to use full function. Energy Door will often want to pay 3 and not use the ability to rebate its 2 enter. We'll probably want to do the other ones. Super Celestia Saber, as well as all of the enter that we're going to be using in order to get ourselves our Craft Signy. So the deck really does like to get a fair amount of enter. It ends its game with stuff like, 20k Phalaris allows you to hit like 2 or 3 times in the course of a game, so that can get you upwards from 1 to 2 mills even, just refresh on the opponent. But there's nothing nastier than putting a Lancer on that, right? So then you're lancing through and also milling the opponent out for a damage. We went over this one and talked about how adding a soul for 10k here really helps, but also worth mentioning that anything in this deck, with the exception of Bang and the Oganas here, the 10k will get them over a 13k threshold, which is actually pretty strong. The Oganas are just some extra discard, just some extra removal. It's not as powerful here as it is in other decks. Again, we only run 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, which is the bare minimum you need to run 3 Oganas. So you're really only going to get 1 Ogana off at any point in time, but you might get a late game Ogana too. It's worth mentioning that's black, so it is good to be able to get back. Speaking of things that are black here, Green Gas is a 2 of. This is strictly so that way you can use Super Celestia Saber and get back something green if you need to. Sometimes the deck is a little green heavy, and it does allow you to have a little bit of that flexibility. If you're just grabbing you don't want any black cards in particular, you just need something to help yourself out there, then that's an option that you can do. The remembers are really strong here. One cool thing that you can do with a remember is if you actually put the soft-boiled egg, if remember were to get removed due to negative effects, let's say it gets negative 12,000, soft-boiled egg would disappear and would actually cause remember to be tapped, and then because it's downed, it would get plus 3,000. So the negative 12,000 would still kick in, but it would be a 15k when it would kick in at this point, and it would be 3,000 over the threshold to survive. Something interesting that you can do with that deck, do what you can with it. And remember is really, really annoying to have on the field for long terms, as is Exia. Exia is a little less impressive as time's gone on with this deck, but you still need it to basically beat aggro out. Coella's there as a little bit of insurance as well. More importantly, Coella can spend an enter to draw extra cards, which is something that's not utilized mostly in all these other control decks that exist and potentially use Coella a little bit, but this deck really loves to have enter sinks in it. You'll see there's just enter sinks everywhere, and that's because this deck really functions like, if nothing's pressuring its enter, this deck functions on high octane, just doing all of the effects you could ever possibly want constantly. The last one is Anna Mirage here. It's a 2 of because it's actually pretty important to the strategy. It lets you have those 13ks out, opens a lane, lets you deal more damage. This deck is surprisingly resilient, surprisingly punishing the opponent on attacking, and surprisingly able to crack back pretty hard. I had a really positive matchup against Dash, for example, with this because they just couldn't deal with the fact that every damage was getting blocked, every damage was getting guard, and that I was cracking back for a ton of damage constantly. And it didn't even matter if they tried to enter burn me because you just had so much extra to spare. So this is the Mel deck itself. I think it's really strong. It definitely says 5 guards here right now. I'm still cleaning up my stuff to be public from the GP. Try it out. Let me know how you guys think. I think this deck is quite excellent.